If I should come up with an advice for young architects and young professionals, it is for sure that we need to do innovations. We need to be bold. We need to throw risk over our shoulders, not to be stupid, but we need to understand that there's a big liability also on us, and we have to take it. And if you are willing to take risk, invent ideas, follow them, and keep working with it to make a better future, it will happen. And we are missing a whole generation of new architects and innovative thinkers that pushes this, and not only pushes it to a theoretical point, but pushes it all the way through. And so I think that, talking to the young professional and the young students, they are the old ones now. The young ones is the coming climate generation, and our biggest responsibility is to create as many tools and handles for them to succeed on the problems that we created for them. Oh, that's a very good question, how and why I chose architecture. I think when I look back, there is two kind of periods of my life where there is a very clear trace. And one of them is that when I played a lot of handball, and I thought that should be my career. But we were traveling around to many different cities to play, and one day, looking at these structures, and I think I wasn't very old. I think I was maybe 12 or 13. I all of a sudden saw the city, where you, as a child, you're just passing through and you're doing what you do and play and have a good time. But all of a sudden I saw a physical structure and the space between the buildings. And I remember the exact day. I know where I was, which street. It was called Bülowsvej in Copenhagen. And all of a sudden it hit me that, wow, what if you could actually create those structures? What if, how do you do that? Everything that we are in, this space, the city, the street, the buildings, the lightings, all this, which was design, architecture, and space. All of a sudden, I realized it, and I hadn't seen it for the 13 years that I've been alive. So I think that was a turning point for me that I really, that must have been, it was almost divine, you who can create this? So to actually do that, that was something that I really, really would like to do. And at that point, I didn't really know what that meant, but I remember that point. I was brought up in the middle of Copenhagen, but I always say that I was brought up as a country boy, because I was allowed to do everything. So even though we lived in a small house, I were allowed to use all tools, build whatever I want. I could paint in the middle of the living room. I had a tremendous freedom to do things, but I would never get anything new. So I never had a new bike, toys, a drum set. I had to invent things always. But I just started to build things and design things, and all the time I had to take something that was worth nothing and transform it into something nicer. So that was, building couches out of leather back seats from Jaguar cars that was kind of waste, or build furnitures out of discarded wood and so on. And it came so natural to do things with stuff that I thought had a potential. So I thought I should be a furniture designer or an industrial designer. That's really where it started. But I didn't know how to draw. I wasn't very good at that. But I could build everything. And so that was where I started. And in Denmark, if you want to come into an architecture school, unless you have the grades, which I didn't either, because I was building stuff with my hands and not reading books, I had to learn to draw. And I think that for me was a really changing point, because then I had to be serious about what I wanted to do and make a choice. And so I had to make a lot of money to pay for school, to learn how to draw and kind of transform ideas to something that's legible and communicative in a different level. And that gave me access to different schools in Denmark afterwards that I could choose from. And I could choose to be an industrial designer or an architect. And for me, it was maybe very naive, but my way of thinking was, if I can actually design a building, then I can probably also design something else. And I know an industrial designer would kill me for saying that, but that was my way of thinking. And I think that I still brought it with me, because with all these material innovations that I'm doing, it is a kind of industrial design on a product or a material, that you start with something where it's nothing, and then you find a way to make matter out of it and create something that has value to as many as possible. And in this case, first of all, for your own design. And that gives you freedom. So the connectivity between working with small entities, objects, and problems globally or locally or in your hand, and then all of a sudden making it part of your design, it's an enormous freedom. And I think Rem Koolhaas' exhibition Elements at the Biennale some years ago, almost 10 years ago, really struck me, because all of a sudden it was so evident that we didn't have any design control. If you are really tough on ourselves and our business, you would select things from a catalog. And if you wanted to change the handle, the mullions, the surfaces, you couldn't. It was fixed. And I think that freedom of being the master builder, what we always say that we as architects are very holistically thinking, and we are in control of this whole building process. And all of a sudden we've been narrowed into a very small part of the building process. And this way of engaging with materials in the way that we do in the office now has given us a tremendous freedom, because it's kind of gone back. We feel like we are more at the end of the table for many discussions when you choose to go this way, because the questions are many and we actually sit with the solutions. It's very important that we teach both the young architects and designers that that the realization of your ideas, innovations, and visions, they materialize through your hands to begin with. And I think we do become more and more detached. Just a matter of should we build a model for the client or not? I mean, how can that ever become a question? The question could be, should we do a mock-up of a material that doesn't exist for the client? Good question. Of course we need to do that. Do we need to experience and build it ourselves? Yes, we do. Because trying to explain to a contractor and to the client what risks lies within taking this choice, you need to have been there somehow. And so that definitely is something that we're losing if you don't know how you put things together. The loss of understanding of materials is tremendous. And also the understanding of gravity, wind, climate, surfaces, all these things that you start to sound very old when you say you can't really feel that in a 3D model. But when you transform it into something of these materials, then it's really true, unless you just take something from the catalog. And for me, that catalog is the root to all evil, why we are in this problem we are. Because the emergency is that every material we choose is not sustainable, almost, unless you choose to work with wood. Then everything else has that problem. The embedded carbon and the use of energy, it can't be recycled. And so we are now in a kind of a war against this type of materials, where we have to engage, and we can only do that by using our kind of physical appearance to make that change. And I think I start to see it more and more in schools, that this because it's something that's super interesting to investigate. And I always talk about Alexander von Humboldt, that invented, in my opinion, nature, and also what is the title of his books. And people often don't know him, especially in the north, and many other places than obviously German-speaking countries. But the fact that he started to understand the complexity of ecosystems, analysis, understanding, collecting data, and so on. And that was the natural system. And that helped us to understand where we are today. I always say that the new natural system, we've just started to understand what that's about. And that's a new urban ecology that we understand very little of. And we have to respect that the knowledge is very little, and we have to start now. And we have to collect and do what Alexander did, for everyone to understand how to navigate and how to create change. And the only problem here is that he didn't have, a timeline that was starting to, phase out. we're in trouble. So it has to go quickly. But I really do see that we sometimes, when I'm asked why doesn't it happen faster, I think this kind of understanding of how complex a system that we are diving into, that it's everything that needs to change, not just waste becoming a resource, but it's everything behind it: policies, law, buildings, legislation, the urban planning, us as architects, designers, everyone in the value chain needs to do something differently for this understanding to accelerate. How does the economy and our clients inflict how we work as architects? And for sure, we've seen the past, actually many decades, our kind of realm and area of excellence kind of shrinking. In some countries you ask the architects for a volume and a color, and that's the kind of presence that you have in the architecture, which obviously loses so much to what we see when we travel around and see cities. But I also, we say, and you probably say this in many countries, when you point one finger, at least 4 points at yourself. And I think we've been very good as architects also saying this and yelling up and complaining about it. But maybe we didn't do so much or haven't been smart about what does that actually mean? What type of position are we in, and how do we kind of change this to being a leader position? How do we position ourselves? We are not the strongest ones, but we certainly do have the power to put ourselves in a position where we make very big change in the knowledge and the choices of how architecture is being made. And what we are experiencing now is that sustainability is probably that handle. Because right now we are seeing politics from EU, taxonomy, that is putting a huge pressure on this CO2 reduction. 30% recycled, upcycled materials in the buildings. They need to collect data on portfolio level. There are so many things, and our clients is actually quite scared. What does this mean? We don't know how to handle it. We don't even know how to register it. So I think at this point of time, there's actually really a potential of us putting ourselves very high in this. Because we're also now saying that, even though ecological architects has been saying for a long time that, if you do this, client, then in 50 years you have a building that's worth more. So where's the data? Where's the evidence of my pre-investment? And we couldn't show that. And now we are seeing that these sustainable estates, they're worth more to the public, to the residents, to the owners. It branded the contractor, it branded the architect, it branded the client, and everyone, not only kind of the social, economic, and environmental Brundtland 3. It's not the 3 layers more value, it's way more. And I think that's the big change. And the one in this, almost the only one that can make this evident is the architect. And that's positioned us in a very, very unique situation that we can deliver that change and the added value on so many different layers. So even though they're only looking for, higher turnover and making more money on the projects, but if that means that it needs to be a sustainable project, then we can deliver that. What made me change from being more, you can say, a classical architecture, performing classical architectural work, and then to what we do now. And I really remember also when that happened, because I was very proud. I won a competition, and I had a different company with some other colleagues of mine where we studied together and classically started together. The project had everything. It was a complex shape. There were so many sustainability ideas in it. How it would ventilate the facade, how it would digital manufacture it, how it would engage and materials. It had everything, and the budget was there. And I remember we won it over kind of a Christmas, where I was sitting between Christmas and New Year's Eve making the competition and really struggling to make this perfect. And then we won it. And I decided I would do all the DD, all the design documents, I would be lead on this. And I did. And I worked, as everyone does, really, really hard for struggling for realizing the project. And the day it was finished, there was no sustainability in the project. And I know how much I tried to push it in, and I lost every battle. And then I stopped doing architecture. I was like, I'm done. This is it. This was the perfect storm, and I missed it. And so I stopped there, and then I asked myself what happened. And it was very evident that I couldn't explain the client the value of this sustainability. I couldn't say what it would cost. I couldn't even uncover the risk of him saying yes to some of their ideas. And for sure, I couldn't say when there was the return of the investment for these ideas. Other than that was the right thing to do. And so I stopped. I quit the office that I was in. I moved. I was living in a small apartment. I was just looking out the window, and I did that for a year. And then I decided, or I was thinking, what needs to be done? And that was the change for me. And the change was that I needed to fight back and come up with a new business model for architecture. It wouldn't be enough just to say I wanted to do sustainability. The model needed to change. I had to change. And the arguments for delivering sustainability had to involve economy. It had to involve beauty and data on why this is better than what we're doing today. And one thing that was super important was that it couldn't cost more than what we were doing that day. If I could prove that, then I had a business, for sure. And I just wanted to be me. I didn't want to have a growing business. I just wanted to help the industry change. And then that part of the plan has changed, so we're a little bit more in the office now. But our target for making change in the industry is number one. We look for the solution where we have the biggest CO2 impact and sustainability impact. That's number one. And obviously that makes the choices in the office and the environment very different from many other places.